2, 1. Hi, this is Adrian Alsema from Colombia Reports. Today we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the war on drugs, together with a guest from Washington, Adam Isacson of WOLA. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Hello, Adrian.
Um, Congratulations on 50-year perpetual success in your war on drugs.
It's like the 50 years war. It's like, I don't know, the York and Lancaster houses have been fighting and nobody wins. But today's the day that Richard Nixon, back when I was about 8 months old, decided that we were going to declare war on drugs because all of our other wars were going so well, I suppose.
Yeah, um, we're 50 years ahead. Um, Juan Manuel Santos, Colombia's former president, just came out with a tweet saying that that war is lost. What's your opinion?
Every single measure you could think of would indicate that that war is lost. Right now, the United States is breaking its records for the annual numbers of overdose deaths from illegal drugs, and if it's hard to find any measure of success at all, despite everything that we've done.
Yeah, because well, that depends on like what if the war on drugs is actually meant to combat drugs. Like, I remember reading about this policy advisor of Nixon saying that it was essentially to have something against um, the anti-war movement that was quite active
Mhm.
at the time, um, and the black minority in the United States. So I suppose like as a social control mechanism, it
A
it,
social
it
control
may
mechanism,
may have helped.
some sort of litmus test between who are what the Colombians call the gente de bien and who are the people who are undesirable. Since the war on drugs was proclaimed, the population in U.S. prisons, the incarcerated population, has multiplied, and a incredibly, I don't have the number in front of me, but an incredibly high percentage of adult black males have had to spend some time in prison, often for possession of marijuana, which is, of course, legal in some form in many U.S. states now. There was a huge racial element to this, and a huge political element to this as well.
Yeah,
And meanwhile, of course, it's just been just as easy to obtain as it always has been.
yeah, but because you've been working on Latin America for how long?
I studied it in college, graduated college in '92, and have somehow managed to get uh, paying work since the mid '90s, working on Latin America.
So um, you could say that the war on drugs started like as a domestic issue, but later really became an important tool in U.S. governments like foreign policy in Latin
Hmm.
America, like in Colombia and in Mexico, Nicaragua.
Well, Colombia is your classic example because whatever you were declaring war on, they always had something. The Cold War was the war on communism. You had plenty of communist guerrillas, starting with the FARC in the '60s, that we could help them fight. The Cold War ends, and of course, this is, Pablo Escobar is still in his heyday, and the Rodriguez Orihuela brothers are there, so it slid seamlessly right into the war on drugs. And then, the war on drugs is still going on, but losing some steam, and the war on terror happens, and Colombia has, as of September 11th, 2001, three groups on the State Department's terrorist list. So it fit that war on also. It's been interesting in the last year, really since sort of like second term Obama, there hasn't been a frame in which Colombia can fit so cleanly, or much of Latin America can fit so cleanly. And we have seen some reduction in police and military assistance since then, although it's still, we could talk about this, it's still ridiculously robust. But
How
there is
robust
no
is it?
guiding frame. About $250 million a year right now in police and military assistance to Colombia. We're going very, very roughly here. I'd say of that 250 million, about 150 million goes to the police and the rest to the armed forces. Yeah, I may be off a bit, but that's my best guess based on what I know. But when George Bush was president during the heyday of Plan Colombia, it was well over $600 million a year. So it's less than half what it was, without even adjusting for inflation, because I guess there's not the compelling frame that there used to be. And I think the 2016 peace accords played a role also in convincing that the challenges that remained were not as great, and Colombia could pay a bigger share. We'll see if that happens, or if we're headed into a third cycle of conflict. But yeah, Colombia is still by far the number one military aid recipient in Latin America.
Without, because I don't really. Oh, here's the thing. So you may know that I'm from the Netherlands.
Yep.
And I last week or maybe more 2 weeks ago, I was watching like my first my first American congressional debate, which was
it was a hearing.
Yeah, the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee. It was, which was like quite an eye opener for me, because I was like, wow, you guys got a lot on your plate. Like it was like it was like about Colombia and China and it was just all over the place.
This is where they bring in the Secretary of State to talk about the state of the whole world, right?
Yeah.
It's remarkable there wasn't
talking about like what the foreign strategy will be. So like I thought it was kind of interesting, because I obviously I don't have any reason to watch American congressional debates usually. I just happen to watch this one, and I thought it was interesting because like maybe 3 minutes of the hour were about like Colombia.
It's more than usual.
Yeah, which is why I watched. And the key issue was whether or not like to cut financial aid to the security forces, and particularly the national police. And I kind of didn't understand like what the point of it was. Like I know you've argued like for cutting funds for Colombia's police. Can you explain why you think that needs to be done?
I mean, I would start out by asking, why did we need to aid Colombia's police to begin with? But if that's the case,
I'm like, why do you even pay all these foreign countries? Like surely we can, like the government can make its budget and fund its own police force.
Yeah. Well, to that more fundamental question, I mean, the United States has funded militaries and police forces. The U.S. Special Forces carry out a training mission in something like 140, 150 countries a year. Why?
Seriously?
Yeah,
that many?
Look it up. Yeah. I mean, there are deployments or training operations or training events or exercises or courses or exchanges in almost every country in the world. Why? Obviously, you could talk about the dynamic of empire, but you could also just talk about the United States and its investors values stability. In order to have stability in case a contingency ever happens, you want to have interoperability. These are the words. You want to be able to have you want to know some of the key military officers, maybe get to know them early in their career. You want them to know how to use the same equipment. You want to and maybe sell them some of that equipment. You want them to at least share some of our own interests. And in the case of Colombia, it's a big one. You're right. I mean, Colombia's defense budget is, I don't know, the peso exchange rate, I don't know, but it's something like $9, $10, $11 billion right now. So our $250 million is kind of dust. compared to that. But the 150 that goes to the police is paying for things that Colombia probably wouldn't want to make a priority of if it had to. Coca eradication. I don't think there'd be a robust coca eradication program, even in Duque's Colombia, unless we were helping pay for it, because it's a big drain on resources, and it puts them in conflict with communities. Fumigation, if that happens, is even worse. Or interdiction, or going after kingpins. I mean, if you're Colombia's police, if you were somebody in Colombia's police who wasn't, just interested in cracking heads of protesters, but you actually wanted to make the country a safer place, and you had an extra $100 million, would you spend it on, community policing and crime prevention programs in some of the populated centers of the country, or would you just send eradicators out into Caquetá? No, you probably want to affect the greatest population. But this is a way to make the Colombian police and maintain a counter-narcotics unit that does something that is a priority for the United States, which is supply reduction.
So it's basically a way to sort of maintain the security forces in line with what would be American policy priorities.
Very absolutely. I mean, I don't think a U.S. military planner would deny that. That there's an obvious national interest that they view in having security forces and other institutions, but especially security forces around the world, share our way of viewing the world and our priorities. And that had been, in the Cold War, that was share our view that communism is bad, and then share our view that global terrorism is bad. Nowadays, it's share our view that China and Russia are bad. And it's often been a view against something rather than selling a dream or a utopia.
Yeah,
but that's been the way.
That's what I kind of found interesting when I saw the very first weeks of Mr. Biden's presidency, where he was talking about like our enemies or our adversaries. And like in Dutch politics, like the tone would be different. Like a Dutch politician would speak like about like our potential adversaries, like because like we're like the country is not really the country doesn't really have any active conflicts or disputes, but in the American political jargon, like there's almost automatically like a present enemy or an imminent threat of some sort.
Yeah, Eurasia or East Asia, right? But it's like, the Netherlands is a member of NATO, so they could get brought into this. But yeah, there's always been a war on something, and the current doctrine. I mean, the 2018 National Defense Strategy that James Mattis drew up says very clearly that great power conflict is our number one threat scenario, and we are concerned about the Chinese and we're concerned about the Russians, and they've really tried to de-emphasize the old war on terror frame and bring up this Russia and China one, and that has actually made Latin America a lower priority. Because it's not a huge theater of conflict. I mean, Venezuela and Nicaragua. There's not a lot of places where China and Russia have majorly moved in a way that alarmed those people in that committee room 2 weeks ago. As a result, I mean, the total amount of military aid to Latin America is about as low as it's been in my entire career working on it since the 90s. And Southern Command, which is the military unit that does most operations in Latin America, has seen its budget reduced. But on the other hand, it does mean that there's going to be a reluctance to criticize the behavior of one of your few close allies in the region.
This is why
when the Colombian police, I mean, in El Salvador, maybe even a better example right now, where you've got this populist authoritarian president who wants good relations with the United States, he says, but anytime the Biden administration criticizes some of his behavior, he makes noises about meeting with Xi Jinping or inviting more Chinese investment or something, because he knows it freaks people out here in Washington and might take some of the pressure off of him.
So let's go back to cutting the police funds, because what struck me was that I don't really care living in Colombia, I really don't care if I understand if you're an American taxpayer that you don't want your money to be spent on governments that do stuff that you disagree with. I can imagine like an American taxpayer being in favor of cutting funds to the Colombian police, like after all the human rights violations during the most recent protests. But as a person like living in Colombia, I'm like, but that's really not gonna solve anything. Like that's not going to make the police behave any differently. It's not gonna make society any safer. And I was kind of disappointed about like how that debate was cut short with like the possibility of like, yeah, well, we'll just cut funds. And I was like, well, good for you, but like how is that going to improve my life, you know?
Well, I mean, how much of another country's behavior can the United States change? Especially a country with 50 million people and one of the top 30 GDPs of the world. It's how much bandwidth and money would our government have to spend if all of a sudden we're deciding we're going to go over the heads of Colombia's elite and reform their police for themselves. I mean, maybe it could be done, but it would be like, putting a man on the moon, basically. It would be a very huge effort. So, yeah, I mean, I think the focus of those members of Congress and of much of our, human rights community is the Colombian police have shown themselves in the past 2 years of protests to have a much worse human rights record than we thought they did. And culture, and we can't really change that immediately, but at least we can not contribute financially to it. I mean, we've invested so much in this force, and they're still doing so much assistance. It's the association.
If you there was an explosion in a military brigade in Cucuta, like on Tuesday, which the government tried to spin as a terrorist attack, but can't really produce any evidence. Well, while American soldiers did get in harm's way. So right. I also, and previously too, like when Trump sent in soldiers, I was like, these poor soldiers they're just being like, they're just running around the country, like they're all being sent to like central Colombia, and everybody knows that drugs is being exported on the Pacific and on the Caribbean coast, and all the American soldiers are being sent to places where they, I don't know, I thought it was kind of like, I felt kind of sorry for those guys.
Well, look at U.S. interests, though. I mean, the Security Force Assistance Brigade, these 53 guys they sent to Colombia last year and are probably back in Colombia now. They went to Tumaco, so that is the Pacific coast. Okay. They went to Cucuta and Catatumbo, which is Venezuela, huge U.S. interest right now. Some of them went to the La Macarena area down in the south center of the country, where there's a long-standing fascination with the whole counterinsurgency method of bringing government into an area that is long ungoverned, and how do you make that work? We've wrestled with that in many places. So there's all that sort of a proof of concept for them. So yeah, I think it actually checks a lot of boxes for the U.S. military to do these things, and I bet the guys who are deployed there are pretty delighted that they get to go to a place that is pretty much an active theater of war, but barring what happened Tuesday, at pretty low risk to themselves on a day-to-day basis. And they get to talk war with people who have actually been fighting it. So
instead of just sitting around in a U.S. Army base.
It's the ultimate training, in-country training experience.
Okay, so no need for me to feel bad about them.
I'm sure they're delighted.
But a police cut that you have been proposing wouldn't affect that type of military aid, would it?
Um, Probably not. I mean, if we were talking about freezing aid to the police until there was a credible reform process in place and some of the people responsible for some of the torture, killing, sexual abuse of the last month and a half were credibly being punished in the civilian court system, if we were waiting for that to happen, no, what was going on with the military in Cúcuta or Tumaco probably would have been a whole separate course.
In,
And it wouldn't touch what like the ASMAD, the riot police, were doing
yeah,
in the cities.
yeah, because like the yeah, police is really just about like keeping cities safe, like that, like it doesn't really um uh, well, it couldn't really be part of like US foreign policy in any way. In your
Right.
ideal world, like how would you like to see your government exert its influence like in Colombia? Like what in your opinion would be like the perfect partnership or bilateral cooperation?
Look, we would like, I think it would serve U.S. interests and Colombia's interests if Colombia was a far more inclusive democracy, one where that respected human rights and punished it anytime it was violated. How do we get there? It means that your main point of engagement is not people in uniforms. It's people who have been fighting to reform their country, people who actually have a reputation for honesty and for building responsive democratic institutions. And Colombia has more of them, I think, per square foot than most countries. They are called human rights defenders and social leaders. And they are called often, you can go to the Fiscalia or the Supreme Court and find not everybody there, but certainly many people there that made that description inside many institutions as well.
Yeah,
We should be
there's
putting most of our energy into a better U.S. policy would put most of its energy into upholding, funding, training, and strengthening the reformers.
and I suppose the because if we're talking about policing, the bottleneck in safety, like public safety in Colombia, is not really the police. It's the justice system. So like the police can arrest like 1 million people, but the prosecution can't really prosecute. It can't adequately prosecute like criminal activity, and then nobody ends up convicted, and you end up with a sort of a, I don't know,
Yeah.
a sort
There's
of a
it's more than even
quasi
just that.
justice system, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's many places, including the United States, where cops complain of arresting people and just to have them freed the next day, all that kind of stuff, because the justice system's so dysfunctional. I go further.
Wait. You have that problem in the United States too.
You'll hear cops complain about that in many municipalities. Sure, that we arrested the gang member, and he's out the next day because yeah, that happens all the time. We have to arrest him 8 times before he actually pays any jail time. Blah blah blah. This is something that law and order folks argue, but in both cases, what you're missing here is if the United States wanted to help Colombia be more secure as well as more democratic, it's not just the guys in uniform. There's a whole security sector here that we only a part of. Yeah, the military is sometimes part of that,
and a social and socio economic sector. I can imagine that like also like for just normal bilateral ties, like when it comes to trade or whatever, that like a more inclusive economy would be beneficial to the US. Like you would have like more healthy trade relations, for example.
we haven't figured out how to do an inclusive economy at home. Actually, we haven't really figured out how to do a security sector either. But without getting into well, let's do the inclusive economy first. I mean, I think we should be careful about trade and assistance policies that increase inequality and increase the population that is just excluded from participating in the economy. Unfortunately, we're doing a lot of that here at home. We have really since Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. But rather, between getting into the socialism versus neoliberalism argument, I mean, yeah, we should at least be doing no harm in our trade and development policies to Colombia. I don't think that we can determine their economic model, nor should we, but don't worsen the exclusion.
Yeah,
Um,
because that's like what makes the country so unstable. Like in like
mhm.
a significant portion of society simply doesn't have access to the legal economy. Like
Mhm.
they could be productive farmers and contribute to the production of avocados or
Yeah.
whatever crop you imagine, but the infrastructure simply doesn't exist, and consequently, like they end up working, like growing coca for drug traffickers, and
Um,
maintaining a very sophisticated illegal economy, because it's not just drug trafficking, well, because that's another thing that
right.
I kind of find weird, that there's a lot of focus on drug trafficking as if it were like a charitable cause, like we don't send cocaine to the United States because we think you deserve a good party. There's a whole economic system attached to it, with money laundering and political corruption, and I have the idea that that's sort of historically just being ignored. What, do you agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, if anybody's watched season one of The Wire, remembers the line: if you want to go chase drugs, you'll get drugs. But if you want to chase the money, then you don't know where the f it's going to take you. And that's true. I mean, most of the drug war stuff we see is either spray planes or people out on the ocean catching semi-submersibles, or whatever you get from the Mexican cartels. But you don't see enough of photo. You see lots of photos of bags of cocaine and stacked up nicely, but you don't see photos of banks that have been cracked down on, or real estate investments that are clearly dirty inside U.S. soil. You don't see enough. I mean, you get
Do you
once in a while,
think
but you
do
don't see enough politicians who participate in this.
do,
Go ahead.
do you think that maybe that there's a sort of a maybe subconscious, like a fear of like finding out, like if you go after the money, that because you don't know where it leads, that it may lead to like places where you
To your friends, or
what
who you thought were your friends. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah, not
you're
that everybody in Colombia's elite and political system is deep into narco trafficking. Of course not, but too many, especially at the level of regional politicians, they absolutely are.
well, not to mention the banking system, um the
Probably.
the yeah, I would love like the US Department of Justice to investigate um, Colombia's biggest banks, um,
Banks,
because
cattle
they are
ranching, and yeah.
they have been they've always been involved in money laundering, and frequently being told that they are not implementing the necessary measures to combat money laundering.
The banks are clearly a problem, but they must be at least partially doing their job. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the black market peso exchange and all the trade mispricing, and the investments in cattle ranches and hotels and all those other ways that people launder money, because the banks would be able to do it all. So they're doing something, but not enough. Um, but yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it spreads so much further beyond just that one sector. That a lot of people who in Colombia, they love to use that expression, people quienes viven en la legalidad, people who appear to be on the legal side, or on the side of the law, and well behaved, uh, actually seem to have a different balance sheet, that it's awfully, there's just not enough energy put into trying to discover that other balance sheet that they maintain,
Yeah,
that has all the dirty dealings.
and and it seems to have become a sort of a culture too, where
Hmm.
everybody I mean, like a large portion of this society depends on trafficking one way or another. Like either like through the proceeds of drug trafficking itself, or associated economic activity like flipping land or
Right.
like laundering money, which I also suppose like is happening inside the United States. I don't suppose this is I assume this is like
Yeah.
a transnational business.
It's amazing how little we know about it, but clearly it's happening inside the United States. At the level of rumor and belief, yeah, particularly in places like South Florida and Texas, a lot of the real estate is, has dirty money going through it. Our banks do once in a while end up in trouble, but often it's just things as common as like stored value cards on cash and things like. There are just so many ways. There's this cat and mouse game, but the federal government cat, just doesn't have the resources that it needs. So it's sleeping 22 hours a day, like my 18-year-old cat in the other room, and not keeping up at all with the money launderers. And again, it just takes you to very politically inconvenient places if you're really going to follow that money carefully.
Yeah, because then you're gonna look into like who is funding the campaign of senators like Marco Rubio or
Perhaps, or just even what foreign leaders. I mean, we already found out about a lot thanks to our Justice Department about Juan Orlando Hernandez, the president of Colombia. The president of Honduras, also known as co-conspirator number 4, and how many other people in high positions around the region are involved in that kind of corruption. And I mean, a lot of them are involved in. There's like sort of two kinds of corruption too. There's the lava jato kind of corruption where you're just skimming from the treasury or contracts. And that tends to be a little less deadly than the other kind, which is actually conniving and advancing the cause of organized crime, which is, killing so many people around the region. Obviously, if you're skimming from the health budget, you are also killing people, but one is more violent than the other.
yeah. And yeah, maybe I should look. Do you think that journalists are also like sort of like dropping the ball there, like that we are too focused on like writing like 10,000 kilos of cocaine intercepted and nobody actually investigating the money trail?
Well, I mean, there are journalists who are trying to uncover money laundering, who are trying to uncover organized crime ties to politics, and a lot of those journalists are dead in Colombia, but especially in Mexico, it's even worse. But still, it's hard because it's dangerous. It's also hard because money laundering is complicated. I mean, it's gotten so sophisticated.
Yeah.
Bitcoin only makes it more so. That it's very hard to cover. But yeah, what you just described though, this, let's do a stenographic report about the latest 500 kilos that the Navy says they just got, and then there's no follow-up. You never know whose cocaine that was. You never know who benefited from it. You never know actually if that cocaine was ever destroyed.
Yeah,
what happened in court afterward.
I did an
That's
investigation into like the cocaine exports during the coronavirus, and what was
right,
very
yeah.
interesting was that in 2020 you saw a major increase in cocaine interceptions in Europe, and in the United States you saw a drop in interceptions because there has been such a focus on the Mexican border, and while everywhere in the world like cocaine enters through the seaports.
Container traffic, yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, oh wow, they've been looking like where cocaine is not entering the country. Like I thought it was very revealing because like when there was like a shutdown, cocaine interceptions dropped, but you're not gonna tell me that cocaine imports stopped because like cocaine was like found in every seaport in Colombia, like, and all the way down to to Santos, like in the southern tip
In Brazil.
of Brazil. Um, so it's like it's going like in sea containers like everywhere. And then I realized like if you're even gonna start looking into shipping containers, you're just going to stop trade. Period. Like if you're gonna start
Right.
checking shipping containers, then all fruits that are being imported into the U.S. will just rot away
There aren't enough
in
drug
Newark.
sniffing dogs. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's basically like that. It's
No,
you just can't do it. Like you couldn't even if you checked 1% of every container entering the U.S., you would basically paralyze like all legitimate trade.
yeah. I mean, a couple things here. I mean, it is happening in the United States. In 2019, they found some record-breaking shipments in containers in, I believe it was in New Jersey and in
Yeah,
Philadelphia,
Philadelphia.
like 15 tons at a time, huge. And so I doubt also that that dropped off in 2020. It's just that they didn't find any more. DEA still works off this theory of, go fast boats and semi-submersibles in small amounts being the main way this is going through. Maybe their intelligence is changing, but nobody here is sounding the alarms about container traffic. So maybe their intelligence isn't pointing to it. Doesn't mean that their intelligence is right.
Well, it may be,
But you
but it
touched on
may
something
be
even.
but it's also like a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like when you're finding cocaine on the Mexican border, then your assumption that that is where cocaine
Right,
enters the country is only being reinforced, even though
right.
like it could be a um, um, well,
Or if Colombia's police and navy claim that they've gotten 450 tons just within, a couple hundred miles of Colombia's territorial waters, almost entirely on small boats, that you think that's where it is. But you're right, the containers are a big thing. And how would you stop? It seems like containers could be stopped easily by putting a lot of pressure on the exporting ports and companies. If it's
yeah.
coming, if you see 3 containers from one banana company that have had cocaine in them, then you're going to put all the weight of the U.S. government on that banana company, you would
Well,
think,
the I believe
um,
the United
until it
Nations
finds another
Office
way.
on Drugs and Crime
That's right, they have a container initiative. Yeah.
has really been putting a lot of effort on the export seaports.
Mhm.
Because like the good thing about cocaine is that its origin is like relatively concentrated. Like it's not like fentanyl or heroin,
You need
which is
plants. Yeah.
well like
Yeah.
those drugs can be produced anywhere, and cocaine like of all the world's drugs, cocaine is possibly like the most the
We don't know
production
why
of it is
coca
like
isn't grown elsewhere. We don't know why coca is not. I mean, they've found coca in recent years in Honduras, Guatemala, and in Chiapas, Mexico. And it's always
oh
in Ecuador and Venezuela. But it's, they just try like a few acres at a time, and then the police get rid of it. But there's nothing climatic or soil related about the 3 Andean countries where coca is grown that's unique. In fact, when it first started being grown, it was in Indonesia. So there's no reason that it has to come from there, and it's a big mystery that it really has not like sprung up in some other ungoverned area. Why isn't it grown in
like Africa, for
sub-Saharan
example.
Africa to serve the European market? Yeah, not clear. Um, but yeah, just returning to the container thing. Ultimately, U.S. demand for cocaine, ballpark figure, maybe 600 or 700 tons a year. That's enough to fit. That would fill maybe 15 to 20 containers. If it was all the way full, that's the entire volume you're searching for, scattered over all the container ships, all the go fast boats, everything else all year round. It's a wonder that they managed to interdict what they can. Take that now. Cocaine is huge. It's a little bigger than methamphetamine in volume for the dose that people take, and that's humongous compared to heroin, which is humongous compared to fentanyl. I mean, you take just a few grains of fentanyl, and that's enough to overdose on. And that is what is killing the most people in the United States now. And it is so small, much of it just comes through the mail. And it's made, it's synthesized from chemicals. I mean, the fact that you're trying to find cocaine in all U.S. container traffic, and then you're trying to find fentanyl in the mail, it basically means the drug war is over. You're just never going to be able to do that.
Yeah, but which brings us back to what former President Juan Manuel Santos said, that that this war is lost, and he also said that prohibition is the original sin.
Let's assume, as defense minister and as president, he worked within that framework quite happily. So nothing that there's this whole band of ex-presidents that have found religion once they leave power.
Yeah. And also guys who've never been president, like me, like because I just in my country, like as far as I know, like my government gives away heroin for free. And when they started doing that, street crime it just disappeared. So like what that's concerned, I'm kind of happy that Juan Manuel Santos like is seeing the light, but because like it's been, I don't understand like how the United States has done like prohibition, like with alcohol, which turned out to be a utter failure, and then they start the whole circus again, and with the same results, like the like mafias and all kinds of like criminal economies. Like why, where does this,
the prohibitionist urge, culturally,
where does that come from?
A lot of it probably, even though you're from Northwestern Europe, it comes from our Northwestern Europe Calvinist religious origins. We are a very religious people, and those religious codes, especially if you're Catholic or if you're from most Protestant churches, it's frowned upon. It's seen as nonconformist, and it's seen as ungodly to be medicating yourself like that. I mean, there's many aspects of human nature that our religiosity looks down on, many of them victimless, and that's one of them. So that is a big part of it. There's also just sort of the concern, more rational people, not that a religion is irrational, but more scientifically minded people who would be opposed to or in favor of prohibition, they would use the seatbelt argument. As soon as we used seatbelts, the number of highway fatalities went down. Having cocaine be illegal is a sort of seatbelt. They're operating under the assumption that if you were to make it legal and more freely available, more people would use it, more people would be addicted to it, more people would neglect their kids, more people would drive under the influence.
That's a no one, because like a seatbelt.
But that's the variable. How many more people would use it if it was legal?
Yeah, but a seatbelt is like regulation. It's not like banning cars. Like it's just like, well, you can use cars, but like please put on a seatbelt.
Right. And that's the variable that we don't know. I mean, if it was more legal, how many and regulated, how many more people would use it? I mean, we have experiments, I guess, like the Netherlands, like Portugal, and now cannabis in many U.S. states, and we're gonna have to see what that variable looks like. People are more willing to experiment with cannabis, mainly because everybody's had it, but also because it is less addictive. It's nobody gets hooked, strung out for a lifetime on marijuana, and there's the idea of a marijuana overdose would be extremely rare. So the costs are seen as lower of making it more available. But that will also show us, I mean, have we gone from 30% of the country using it to 80% of the country using it, or did it stay more or less the same after 5 or 10 years of legality?
Well, I believe in the Netherlands it stayed the same.
Did it really? All the
and
coffee shops and everything
and
stayed
in Portugal too.
So we need to see it for ourselves, but if the experience with cannabis 5 years from now shows that the user population isn't much higher, or at least the social, even if it is higher, I mean the social costs associated with it did not increase, then I think there will be more openness to abandoning prohibition for other drugs.
Yeah, but do you think that like the not even like in the US, but just general, if we talk about drugs, that we should really be more focusing, like, because like I suppose like we both agree that using heroin is bad, and we would both advise our friends not to do it because it
Hmm.
fucks you up.
Doesn't seem to make people's lives better. No.
No. um, but there doesn't seem a sort of a political culture, not in the US, not in Colombia, not in the UK, like where we are focusing on harm reduction, rather than
Right.
like us like trying to make a sort of a moral statement, like we think this is bad, so we ban it.
Hmm.
I would argue like maybe we should have a completely different look at how we formulate that type of public policies.
Yeah. I think we just need to get there. I mean, uh, it's just that, yeah, I think we're slowly moving in that direction. But even if countries like the ones you just mentioned start doing that, if my colleagues who go to Vienna for the UN meetings, then you have the Chinese, the Russians, the Saudis, and the Filipinos and others who are far more puritanical about this. I mean, you're not going to reach a world consensus on this for a long time. There's places where it's almost a capital crime to be caught with drugs, and maybe it is. So they're moving actually in the other direction. But yeah, for our societies, it's just not a change that's going to happen overnight. And yeah, for a drug like like heroin, I think there will at least always be a strong urge to regulate, how it's dispensed to people.
Well, the experience in the Netherlands is that giving it away for free is pretty well regulated. Like nobody,
Hmm.
um, drug use is relatively low.
Yeah,
Um,
I've never seen anything about the program in the Netherlands, like how many people it is, how much they have to pay per day in order to make that happen, how you enter that program.
do
Uh,
you think that this may be like where?
and what the dosage is also, whether it's just something that maintains you and keeps your withdrawal symptoms away, or whether the government's actually getting you high. I don't know.
Yeah, but do you think that like so like the Netherlands has had like its own experiments like with drug policy, like with
Hmm.
certain results, like in like bad results, good results. Like, do you think that like governments like all over the world are too often trying to just reinvent the wheel?
I think that's probably true. Yeah, they're discovering their own paths anyway. But a part of that is because I've never really heard the Netherlands, the Dutch government ever really talk. If there is a big foreign policy push to discuss their model and their experience, or to promote it, or to say, "Hey, this worked for us," I don't see that being a big message of
No,
any
because
Dutch government.
I
It's
think
almost like
I
this is
think
something they're ashamed of and would rather not talk about.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh
So
shit,
how are
like
other
like
countries
it's
going to find out about it?
like
Yeah.
what if they find out that we give heroin away for free? Like it
Hmm.
shit, it's working. Like how are we?
But it's also diplomatically hard for them because if you're buying Thai stick in a coffee house that is actually from Thailand, then that was imported from somewhere, and they'd much rather not talk about that.
Yeah, it's but that should be something that policymakers, for the good of their own society, like for the good of American society, for the good of
Hmm.
Colombian society, like that sort of like interaction and like exchanges of experiences in like in policy
Hmm.
experiments, like there should be more exchange, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the UN conventions, which have kept everybody really stuck in the framework of 1961. That's very hard. I mean, the United States is in clear violation of those conventions right now by having legal cannabis, and that's going to keep us from talking about our experience in world forums also.
Explain
Um,
that, please. Like, what UN conventions?
the UN Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961 basically has a list of drugs that must be illegal, and it includes, not just cocaine and heroin. It includes marijuana. It also includes coca leaf. So when Bolivia challenged those conventions under Evo Morales 6 or 7, 8 years ago, and seemed to have gotten away with their formal challenge, but yeah, it's become a document that's impossible to change too because of the other countries that I mentioned that are even harder lined than the West.
Because there
But
will
yeah,
always be
but because of
countries
that,
to,
because you are actually in violation of an international legal commitment, um, countries are that much less willing to talk about the experiments that they have allowed within their borders.
hmm.
It's complicated. It's
It's very I mean, like, but it's just like well, we're kind of like stuck in it. Who came up with that UN convention in the first place? Like,
Oh, this is where I'd need John Walsh on our WOLA's policy program, who knows this stuff inside out. I do think the United States was one of the key players there. But it's interesting. It was 1961, which was not, this was before Hay Ashbury and the hippies and everything else. It was not a time of anti-drug fervor in the United States.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know if the
People
United
weren't
States was
even
the
like
main driver
smoking.
behind this.
Like
Yeah, you
you
had the
probably had
beatniks.
like
Yeah,
you had Jack Kerouac
right.
and
Allen
Allen
Ginsberg.
Ginsberg like
Hmm.
smoking pot, and that was like about the whole
And a lot of
scene.
black jazz musicians, and they didn't, that was, so there was the racial element was always there.
Is that racial element still there?
Oh my God, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the reason why we maintain a lot of these drug laws. I mean the reason why police would do something like stop and frisk. That's one of the things they're looking for. Yeah, I mean I think if you were to ask a leader of a black community almost anywhere in the United States, they would find that yeah the drug laws are still being very heavily used against their community.
So basically, like if you look at like your domestic culture, like your political culture in the United States, combined with like the international culture, like where there will always be countries like in favor of prohibition type
Hmm.
legislation, like we're basically going to be going in
It's going to go
circles for
slow.
another while.
It's going to go slow, and I think that parts of the United States will play leading roles. The Northeast, California, but we can't do anything as a country as long as Texas and Alabama and places like that will be always against even the mildest experimentation with different approaches. It may be that a lot of the leadership may have to come from the Andean nations. Maybe Mexico, which is taking some interest. This is one of the few things AMLO has been
So a sort of
creative about allowing to happen.
a sort of a
Um,
Latin American emancipation, like where
some of the countries that have suffered it the most, yeah.
yeah, that's
Um,
what I've been, because like it's just not gonna yeah, like we have suffered the most.
right.
I'm shocked like how I've been touched by like the by drug trafficking violence, and how it affects like my social circle.
Really,
Um,
they're in Medellin.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's it's completely disrupting like um, our culture, like and the social what you call it, tejido social,
Yeah, the fabric. Yeah.
yeah, the social fabric. Um, so yeah, maybe we should be the ones like telling consumer nations like to just like go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I mean it's the Bolivians did that with coca leaf, but not with cocaine. But with coca leaf, they did not suffer many consequences as a result of that. And in fact, they managed to get their illegal coca problem pretty much under control
Hmm.
by allowing the cato, the legal coca, to exist, increasing the amount that could be legal, and then the illegal coca didn't really increase until Gina Anez anyway. Um, so yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see how far a country could go in pursuing that without suffering huge diplomatic and even economic consequences. Um, if Colombia were to do that and Colombian cocaine exports were to explode, yeah, you could see where prohibitionist countries might
Yeah,
use
there would
a
be a
lot of tools,
problem.
maybe even force. But yeah, but if your theory is right that increasing or rather regulating it and legalizing it doesn't increase the market for it very much, then you might not see any difference. Who knows?
Um,
What might happen is that cocaine. What would interesting would happen was if coca is legal or regulated, uh, the farm gate price would plummet. Ultimately, it's just a bush that's super easy to grow, and
yeah,
campesinos would make a lot of money off of it.
yeah, and it's like of all the drugs that I've done, I thought cocaine was, I don't know,
I've never done it. I mean, here in the United States,
what?
the
You
sense is
talk
that
so much about drugs without trying it.
well, that one I've never tried. Um,
Well, I did, and it's really not worth the bother.
the sense here in the United States here is, from the 1980s, the stereotype of the reasonably wealthy person who just, put their entire estate and all of their family's earnings and everything up their nose and ended up poor and ruined, or of course, the neighborhood destroyed by crack-related violence and people who do anything and prostitute themselves for their next hit of crack. That's the stereotype, that it is a highly addictive drug that's very hard to leave, along with heroin and meth. Those three, heroin, opioids, and meth. Those three are seen as like the ones that people are not going to shift on. There's a lot of interesting discussion beyond cannabis now about hallucinogenics, about MDMA moving more toward legalization and regulation, because though they do have risks, they're not seen as addictive and they are easy to stop using. But the conversation really hasn't moved to things like meth, cocaine, and opioids
no, like the real
because of that
what would
sense
be
that
a
they're too hard to
risky.
stop using.
Yeah, because they would be high risk
And that you need
experiments.
more and more too in order to feel the same impact.
Let's go back to um, what our conversation was going to be about like the complicated relations between
Hmm.
the U.S. government and the Colombian government, because you had like you,
Yeah.
you have this really weird situation like where under former President Donald Trump, like the Colombian government and the U.S. government were quite aligned, like
Hmm.
in their in their domestic policies and consequently um, in their bilateral policies. Then Joe Biden took office in, what was it, January,
January. Yeah.
um, and now suddenly I don't believe I've ever seen relations like being this complicated.
Um,
Well, except like maybe in the late 1990s, like
well, during some pair.
with Samper, but right now, like the Biden administration and the Duque administration couldn't be further apart.
Why do you say that? It's interesting. I mean, obviously, the two presidents haven't had a phone conversation, and there's some bad blood about the Centro Democrático supporting Republican candidates in the elections. But how are you seeing that reflected? I
Well,
mean,
I
looking at
think
the
that's
Twitter
quite a
accounts of officials and things
quite a
like
big
that.
deal. Like some Latin American country meddling in your elections, like that's not
Yeah, but what are the
something.
what have the consequences of that really been for the Duque government so far? There's been no effect on aid or trade. The most that has happened, I would say, is that officials once in a while say something nice about the peace process, which, of course, the Duque government detests the peace process. Uh, but beyond that, I mean, they asked, the classic example is since April 28th, since the Paro Nacional started, and all of these videos and testimonies of police abuse are just flooding. And the human rights community cannot convince the Biden administration to say anything forceful about the police abuse or the need to stop it or the need to punish it. The most they've been able to say is, we are confident in the Duque government's will to investigate and punish these abuses when they happen.
which
To the
is
extent that
quite
they've
which is
happened.
quite similar to the European response. Like there's a lot of like
Yeah, the EU said
I
some strong
just
stuff in the beginning, but not since. Yeah, you're right. Um, and
why
so,
is
but I
that?
don't think that they've.
I mean, it's
For the
so
United States, I can
blatant.
explain. Yeah.
What's so difficult about saying like stop being an asshole?
uh, for the United States, I can explain it. It's
Please do.
they've invested so much. First of all, the geopolitics. We already talked about this whole competition with China. When you look at a map of South America right now, what countries would even be considered pro-U.S. and not hugely problematic? Colombia is probably hugely problematic, but nothing compared to Bolsonaro. You've got Lasso in Ecuador. You've got Piñera, who's on his way out in Chile, maybe Uruguay, and that's about it. I mean, that's about it as far as major countries. And of course, Mexico also is,
So
refusing
that gives Colombia
cooperation, and
like a lot
so
of
they don't have a lot of.
leverage
Yeah, that's
to
one of
just
the
get away
close.
with whatever they want to do.
It, more of what they want to do than they normally would be able to. Yeah. So if they antagonize Colombia and put them in the same column as I don't know, Mexico or Honduras or one of those countries that we don't have great relations with, even though they claim to be, more or less capitalist and pro-U.S., then you've lost a lot of leverage, and you've lost. I mean, just think about this cooperation that happens with the Colombian National Police. All their dependence on the police for these eradication programs, interdiction programs. The police, with U.S. support, are training Guatemalans and Mexicans and Hondurans and Dominicans. There are vetted units of the police that share DEA databases. They don't want to jeopardize everything they built with the national police just
So
because they turned out
basically,
to be
like the
sluggish.
implications of a strong diplomatic response would be basically very difficult to foresee
Now, I
for the
think a
U.S.
skilled
government.
yeah.
I suppose.
I think a skilled diplomat could criticize a friend's behavior and call for improvements in that friend's behavior, both privately and openly, without jeopardizing the overall relationship. But there's not been a willingness to do that. Probably because obviously a strong word from the United States would just imagine the cover stories in El Tiempo and Semana for days afterward if they did say a strong word, and they just seem to be unwilling to do that. And I think that's a shame, because a strong word in early May have saved a lot of lives and helped bring this to de-escalate this long before
Yeah,
it got too out of control.
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
So you don't expect this you don't expect like a major policy shift from the Biden administration when it comes to human rights then?
Everybody keeps asking me, how come, people in Colombia anyway keep asking me, how come the Biden administration hasn't sworn off fumigation? How come the Biden administration isn't, talking constantly about the peace accord? How come the Biden administration wasn't more forceful
Well, but
on,
because
on,
he's not
on
a
police
hippie,
abuses?
and
He's not. He's not. He is
always
not from the
been.
progressive wing of the Democratic Party. You're right.
Mhm.
He's from the Democratic Party is, a big tent with a lot of different points of view, and probably, although the progressive part of the Democratic Party has increased a lot, probably most of the party, especially in the Senate and in the White House, are those who, they'll have a door open and listen to groups like WOLA, but they also have a door open to the business federations and to Central
The
Democratic
Atlantic
politicians when they
Council
come to town.
and blah blah blah.
And well, I mean, there's a lot of think tanks that are, sort of forums for ideas more than advocacy, but they will, that's where they will be, and so they're going to move very slowly and cautiously on something like this, even though it's the third time in a year and a half that we've seen Colombia's police act like this in a city.
Yeah, and kind of like making a complete arse out of themselves, but and also, I mean,
Now,
like
just
it,
look
it
what's
just
happened to their
it,
approval
it, it's
rating
like
now.
it's like having an abusive girlfriend, like if I or a girlfriend who sleeps with everyone, like I don't like you say that like Colombia is very like pro US, but I would argue that it's doing a lot of damage to the United States reputation.
I think it is too. I mean, Colombia's elite at least is very, very pro-U.S. As you can tell, at what how it's like death in life if somebody in the elite loses their U.S. visa. I don't know if the entire country is pro-U.S., but yeah, the yeah, I think it is hurting the
I don't
U.S.
think
image
many
and hurting
people
U.S.
care
interests.
because there's always because if I'm asked if I'm pro US or anti US, I would be like, what are you
What do you
talking
mean,
about?
right?
I'm am I pro or anti Poland?
Let's call
well,
that that's shorthand.
like
That's
I
shorthand for that's
it's
shorthand for sharing U.S. interests and priorities.
right. Then
Yeah.
I suppose
Do
I'm
you support, the U.S. economic model? Do you support the U.S. view that Russia and China are bad actors, that that cocaine should be illegal? All these things we've been talking about,
well.
and many in Colombia's elite absolutely
That's
do think so.
ironic because I and I mean I'm uh, quite a a sort of a anti a lot of things, but I totally
Hmm.
agree with if the U.S. government says Russia is bad, like Putin is bad,
Hmm.
and we need to pull is bad. I I totally agree. They are. W- I may have a lot of differences as a person with specific policy things, for example with drug policy, but I believe that the shared values are pretty commonly shared just throughout
Hmm.
because we just share values that have come from the French Revolution and the American
Right,
Revolution,
right.
where many, no matter if they're liberal or conservative, where they basically have a lot of common values.
Yeah, Enlightenment values, sure. Yeah.
Correct.
Um, that yeah, I mean, I think the United States right now is in almost a civil war over whether to continue with those values right now. Uh, but for now, at least, yeah, I think we probably, especially when you compare it to places like China and Russia, we are certainly the least bad of the systems. And one, but still, even though we are the least bad system, that does not automatically mean that AMLO or Fernandez, or I'm forgetting about Maduro, or Arce in Bolivia are going to align with the United States. There's a lot of distrust, even of this least bad model that we are following.
Yeah, and there's a weird thing with well, what I always find very complicated, when I criticize a specific policy element of the US government, then there's a sort of a reaction I don't understand the whole left right debate that's
Mhm.
going on. If I'm critical of Duque, then I'm for Maduro, and I'm
It's
like
so
like
old
like
fashioned.
why how can you deduct why would I be against one tyrant if I oppose tyranny? There's a weird partisan pettiness to to political debates.
Yeah, it's very old fashioned, I think, isn't it? It sort of harks back to the Cold War
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
Whereas it seems that the real division lately has been: are you for institutions or are you for a person?
Well,
Uh,
are you
Populist
for
or democratic?
libertarian policies or authoritarian
Right,
libertarian government or authoritarian government?
right.
I just don't see the difference between um, one kind of tyranny or the other, you know, like I don't see the difference between Pinochet and Maduro, for example. Like I just
Right.
I think they like Pinochet was a horrible regime, the
Now you've
same
got
as
right now. I
Maduro
mean,
was a horrible regime. What I see in Colombia, it's truly horrible, and I don't really care like what if they say like, oh, we're pro-American, and then they shoot like
right.
dozens of protesters. I'm like, well,
I mean, the left-right thing. I mean, Bolsonaro's on the right, and he's attacking the media, and he's attacking civil society, and he is lying all the time, and he's trying to subvert the military. AMLO is on. No, not a better example. Maduro is on the left, and he has already like completely subverted the military, shut down the media, etc. In the center, you have Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, who's subverting the military, attacking the media, the whole George Soros thing, sounding just like, and all three of them sound often just like Orban in Hungary, or what's his name in Turkey, or Modi in India. I mean, there's a whole wave, and we had one of them for 4 years, and may have one again. Joe Biden, for all his flaws, is one of the only post-populist presidents in the world. And I do think that frames a lot of how he's seeing the world. And so when he looks at Colombia, he looks at Colombia's ruling party, what does he see right now? Certainly anytime Uribe or Maria Fernanda Cabal or one of those people open their mouths, they sound just like Trump people. They sound just like this wave of people who are left, center, right,
well, they're just
around the world.
delusional.
Ivan Duque, not always when he opens his mouth. Certainly Marta Lucía Ramirez, which was why she had a pretty successful trip to Washington, sounding reasonable, conservative party person. Emilio Archila. I mean, there are people in this government who are certainly not raving authoritarian populists, but there are people in this party, the ruling party, who are. So it's, I think that's another reason why the Biden administration is being cautious. They don't want to. They want to strengthen the moderates during the 14 months that remain without, emboldening the radicals, the authoritarians. I don't know if silence really is the way to do that, to be honest, but I could see why they're being cautious.
Yeah, me too. Well, Adam, I'm gonna cut it short. We've been talking for over an hour already.
Who could tell? Well, that's a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's celebrate 50 years of a wonderful war on drugs even more.
And just think, it's very easy to just go buy something to celebrate with. It's still not legal. 50 years after this war.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm an alcoholic, so I have to like drink like 0 alcohol beers. my parties, my parties are lame.
That's your own personal war on drugs. Yes. Well.
Yeah. That's my personal battle. But thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
You too. All right. Bye for now. And thanks everybody for listening.
Okay. From me too, thank you for listening to Colombia Reports podcast. My name is Adrian Alsema, and I hope to be back next week with another guest. Have a wonderful evening. Alrighty.
Brilliant. I think we entertained them.